The Dallas Cowboys are officially at one of the most important crossroads they've faced in years, and it isn't about a quarterback, a draft pick, or a blockbuster trade. It's about leadership, philosophy, and whether this franchise truly understands how deep the defensive hole has become. The search for a new defensive coordinator is now fully underway, and the names coming through the doors of the Star tell a very clear story. Dallas knows it cannot afford to get this hire wrong. Over the past few days, the Cowboys have already conducted 3 interviews, speaking with Minnesota Vikings defensive pass game coordinator Durant Jones, Cleveland Browns safeties coach Ephraim Bonda, and Denver Broncos defensive pass game coordinator Jim Leonhard. On the surface, those names may not jump off the page to casual fans, but they reflect a deliberate shift in thinking. These are not legacy hires. These are not splashy, brand-name coordinators being brought in for optics. These are teachers, schemers, and developers, coaches who have worked in modern defensive systems and have been tasked with solving passing games in an era where stopping the pass is the entire ballgame. At the same time, the Cowboys did attempt to swing higher. They requested permission to interview Atlanta Falcons defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbrich, a respected defensive mind with head coaching experience and a reputation for physical, disciplined football. That request was denied. Atlanta, now searching for a new head coach after firing Raheem Morris, another potential Cowboys candidate, chose to keep Ulbrich in-house. That denial matters because it highlights the competition Dallas is facing. Good defensive coaches are not sitting around unemployed. They are either being promoted, protected, or aggressively pursued elsewhere. And that brings us to the name hovering over this entire process, Brian Flores. Flores is the type of candidate who changes the temperature of a room the moment he becomes available. He is currently the defensive coordinator of the Minnesota Vikings, and his work there has been nothing short of remarkable. In a league that is increasingly built around spacing, tempo, and quarterback comfort, Flores has consistently found ways to disrupt timing, confuse protections, and manufacture pressure without elite personnel. His defenses are aggressive, unpredictable, and unapologetically attacking. This week is critical because Flores is now free to interview for defensive coordinator positions after completing head coaching interviews last week. That distinction matters. Flores is not looking for just any job. He is looking for the right job. And more importantly, he is likely looking for a promotion, not a lateral move. If a head coaching opportunity materializes, that will almost certainly be his priority. But if it doesn't, Dallas becomes one of the most fascinating options on the table. A high-profile franchise with immense pressure, significant resources, and a defense that is desperate for structural repair. According to Calvin Watkins of the Dallas Morning News, the Cowboys are far from finished with their search. After completing interviews with Jones, Bonda, and Leonhard, the organization plans to bring in additional candidates next week. Jim Leonhard, who spoke with the team on Saturday, was the final interview of the initial group, but not the final interview overall. This is not a rushed process. This is a franchise that understands the magnitude of the decision in front of it. And that magnitude becomes painfully clear when you look at the numbers. The 2025 Dallas Cowboys defense was not just bad, it was historically bad. They ranked 30th in the NFL in total defense, allowing 377 yards per game. That alone would be concerning, but the deeper you dig, the worse it gets. Dallas surrendered a league-high 60 total touchdowns. 60. That is not a schematic hiccup. That is a systemic failure. Against the pass, the Cowboys were dead last in the league. 32nd. They allowed 251.5 passing yards per game and 35 passing touchdowns, the second most in the NFL, trailing only the New York Jets. And here's the detail that makes it even more alarming. The Jets failed to record a single interception in 2025. Dallas, meanwhile, was not far behind in terms of ball production. This was a defense that couldn't cover, couldn't disguise, and couldn't take the football away. That context matters when evaluating these coaching candidates. Whoever takes over this defense is not inheriting a playoff-caliber unit that needs a few tweaks. They're inheriting a broken structure. The previous scheme failed to protect the secondary, failed to generate consistent pressure, and failed to adjust when offenses inevitably attacked the same weaknesses week after week. This next defensive coordinator will be tasked with rebuilding the Cowboys' defensive identity from the ground up. That's why the backgrounds of these candidates are so important. Deron Jones has experience coordinating the defensive pass game in Minnesota, working under Brian Flores, and helping implement one of the most aggressive pressure packages in the league. Ephraim Bonda has been deeply involved in Cleveland's secondary, a unit that has consistently played with discipline, physicality, and awareness. Jim Leonard, a former elite safety himself, has built a reputation as one of the smartest defensive minds in football, particularly when it comes to coverage, disguise, and communication on the back end. But Flores remains the standard bearer. If Dallas can land Brian Flores, it would signal a genuine commitment to fixing what's broken. Flores does not run passive defenses. He does not sit back and hope his corners hold up. He attacks protections, forces quarterbacks to identify pressure pre-snap, and lives with the risk that comes with aggression. For a Cowboys defense that spent all of 2025 on its heels, that philosophical shift alone would be transformative. Of course, the challenge is convincing Flores that Dallas is the right place. This is a franchise with immense expectations, constant scrutiny, and an ownership structure that is deeply involved in football decisions. Not every coach wants that environment. Flores, in particular, values autonomy and trust. If Dallas is serious about him, the pitch cannot just be about brand or resources. It has to be about alignment, about allowing him to install his system, pick his staff, and build a defense that reflects his vision. And whoever gets the job will need help. Scheme alone will not fix this defense. Personnel matters. That's why the Cowboys' position in the 2026 NFL Draft is so crucial. With 2 top 20 picks, Dallas has a chance to give its next defensive coordinator the tools he needs. An edge rusher who can win one-on-one, linebackers who can actually run and tackle, and defensive backs who understand leverage and spacing. Coaching and talent must grow together. One without the other will fail. This hire is about more than replacing a coordinator. It's about deciding what the Cowboys want to be defensively in the next era. Do they want to be aggressive or reactive? Multiple or static? Do they want to dictate terms to offenses or spend another season hoping mistakes bail them out? The numbers from 2025 suggest hope is not a strategy. So as this search continues, every interview matters. Every conversation matters. Because the next defensive coordinator in Dallas will not just be calling plays. He will be tasked with restoring credibility to a defense that lost it entirely. Closely to the owner and general manager himself, you can hear something that Cowboys fans have not heard in a long time. Confidence mixed with willingness, ambition paired with flexibility, and perhaps most importantly, a sense that the franchise is finally positioned to attack the future instead of merely surviving it. At his end-of-season press conference, Jerry Jones spoke with optimism about the team's ability to add quality players through both the draft and free agency, and he traced that confidence back to a decision made at the very beginning of the 2025 season, a decision that has quietly reshaped the Cowboys' financial and competitive outlook. Jones described the vision behind the Micah Parsons trade and hinted that the true benefits of that move are still ahead, not behind, suggesting that what the Cowboys were really trying to achieve is only now coming into focus. Away from the microphones and cameras, Jones went even further, floating the idea of busting the budget in pursuit of his long-stated personal goal, becoming the NFL owner with the most Super Bowl championships. He currently sits 3 titles behind New England Patriots owner Robert Kraft, and at this stage of his career, that gap clearly weighs on him. When Jerry Jones talks this way, it forces the league, and especially Cowboys fans, to ask a dangerous but exciting question. Could Dallas actually become aggressive in free agency? Right now, the Cowboys salary cap situation looks less like a clean spreadsheet and more like a Monet painting, slightly blurry and dependent on where you stand. What is clear is that Dallas must clear cap space to comply with the 2026 limit, but the exact number won't be finalized until early March when the league officially sets the cap. As things stand, the Cowboys have roughly $330 million in contracts on the books, while league projections place the cap somewhere between $295 and $305 million. Even under conservative estimates, that means Dallas must find at least $30 million just to get under the cap before making a single addition. And that number could grow quickly if the team applies the franchise tag to wide receiver George Pickens, a move that would immediately add close to $28 million to the cap. At first glance, this might sound like a financial nightmare, but the reality is far more manageable because the Cowboys have built their roster with restructures in mind. Dallas can generate upward of $100 million in cap space by restructuring contract for Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, Tyler Smith, Osa Odigizua, Darren Bland, and Jake Ferguson, simply by reducing base salaries to the league minimum and converting the rest into bonuses. However, not every restructure is created equal, and there are legitimate long-term consequences to consider. Fully restructuring Dak Prescott's deal, for example, would push nearly $8 million per year into future cap figures from 2027 through 2031, ballooning his cap hit to over $75 million in 2027 and more than $85 million in 2028. While that move would provide immediate relief, it would also mortgage the future, and the Cowboys must decide whether short-term flexibility is worth long-term strain. A partial restructure may be the wiser path, preserving flexibility without completely overloading future seasons. The situation with Darren Bland is even more delicate. Coming off his second foot surgery in as many years, Bland presents both upside and risk. His fully guaranteed money expires after this season, which gives the Cowboys a relatively clean exit option in 2027 if things go south. Restructuring his deal now would increase future cap commitments at a time when his durability is uncertain. For that reason, the smartest approach may be to keep Bland's contract untouched unless circumstances force the team's hand later in free agency, during the summer, or near the trade deadline. The good news is that other restructures carry far less risk. By reworking the contracts of CeeDee Lamb and Tyler Smith alone, Dallas can free up roughly $36 million in cap space, money that can immediately be put to use. If the Cowboys want to push even further, they can look toward extensions for defensive tackles Quinnen Williams and Kenny Clark, both of whom are under contract through 2027. Clark, in particular, is due an $11 million roster bonus by March 13th, creating urgency that could be leveraged into a cap-friendly extension. These types of moves highlight just how much flexibility the Cowboys actually have if they choose to use it. Among their 15 unrestricted free agents, 3 stand above the rest in importance: George Pickens, running back Javonte Williams, and defensive end Jadeveon Clowney. All 3 have expressed a desire to return, but each represents a very different challenge. Pickens is the most complicated. After arriving via trade from Pittsburgh, he delivered career highs across the board with 93 receptions, 1,412 yards, and 8 touchdowns. He is now positioned to demand top-of-the-market receiver money, potentially exceeding the $34 million per year deal CeeDee Lamb signed 2 years ago. That reality is why many around the league believe Dallas will apply the franchise tag, buying time, but also introducing the possibility of off-season tension. The Cowboys dealt with a training camp hold-in from Micah Parsons last year, and Pickens shares the same agency, athletes first, raising the possibility of a similar standoff. Clowney's market value has also risen. He led the Cowboys with 8.5 sacks and finished the season strong despite entering his 13th NFL year. He has emphasized his desire to participate fully in the off-season program and training camp, something he believes will allow him to be more physically prepared than he was when he joined the team late last season. His on-field production is critical for a pass rush that struggled in 2025, and his off-field leadership has earned praise from head coach Brian Schottenheimer, particularly for his mentorship of younger players like Donovan Ezraka. Javonte Williams presents a different kind of dilemma. He rushed for 1,201 yards, the most by a Cowboys running back since Ezekiel Elliott in 2019, but he did so on a $3 million salary. On the open market, that number is likely to double on a multi-year deal. Dallas can argue that production at running back can be found anywhere, pointing to Williams himself and Rico Dowdle, an undrafted free agent who also topped 1,000 yards. Whether the Cowboys are willing to pay Williams' market value will say a lot about how they view positional spending. Beyond unrestricted free agency, Dallas must also navigate restricted free agents, most notably All-Pro kicker Brandon Aubrey. Because he was undrafted, Aubrey is a candidate for the second-round tender, projected at just over $6 million. The Cowboys discussed a multi-year extension with his agent last summer, but failed to reach an agreement. Those talks could resume, potentially making Aubrey the highest-paid kicker in the league, while keeping his 2026 cap hit below the tender number. Guard T.J. Bass and Brock Hoffman also factor into this picture, both undrafted players who have proven reliable. Bass started 5 games last season and has shown he can hold down left guard if Tyler Smith stays at tackle, making him a strong candidate for a short multi-year deal that buys out his 2027 free agency. One of the most dominant defensive ends in football, a player who embodies intensity, production, and leadership. And when Crosby's season ended with visible frustration and reported tension between himself and the Raiders organization, those rumors didn't die down, they exploded, and suddenly the question wasn't if Dallas would make another move, but how far they should be willing to go. And that brings us to the heart of today's discussion. Because while fans dream about pairing Micah Parsons with Max Crosby and creating the most terrifying pass rushing duo in the NFL, not everyone inside the Cowboys media ecosystem believes that's the smartest path forward, including 2 well-known voices on Dallas Sports Radio, Sean Sharif and RJ Choppy from 105.3 The Fan,